Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we are going to unpack one of the most profound and honestly most misunderstood laws of power and strategy. Law 35, Master the Art of Timing. Now, right off the bat, I want you to completely throw away the idea that time is just a ticking clock on the wall. A rigid, inflexible scientific measurement that we're all hopelessly bound to. It really isn't. As we'll discover from our source material today, time is actually a psychological construct. It's something you can literally learn to bend, stretch, and completely command once you understand the hidden mechanics behind it. So ask yourself, do you control time or does it control you? Think about how often you feel rushed, panicked, or totally anxious about a deadline. We've all been there, right? But our sources reveal a pretty fascinating psychological truth. Always appearing to be in a hurry actually betrays a fatal lack of self-control. When you rush around, you're signaling to the world and to yourself, really, that you're a victim of circumstances. You're letting external events dictate your internal state. True mastery means always seeming patient, as if you know that everything will eventually come to you. Here is our roadmap for today. We're going to start with the psychology of time. Then we'll look at the ultimate survivor, Joseph Fouché. From there, we'll break down the three distinct forms of time you absolutely must master: long time, forced time, and the final strike, end time. Let's start with section 1, the psychology of time. We really need to explore how human perception literally warps reality. Think back to when you were a kid. The days felt impossibly long, slow and expansive, didn't they? A single summer vacation felt like an entire lifetime. But as an adult, time just seems to whiz by frighteningly fast. Why is that? Well, our source text points out that time depends entirely on perception, and because it's based on perception, it can be willfully altered. Inner turmoil, things like fear, anger, panic, that makes time feel like it's moving much faster. It puts you in tunnel vision and closes off your options. But if you can control your emotional responses to events, time will literally move more slowly in your mind. This altered perception lengthens your view of the future, opening up patience and possibilities. That emotional control, it's the absolute prerequisite for mastering timing. Moving on to section 2, Fouché, the ultimate survivor. To see what this emotional control looks like in actual practice, we turn to Joseph Fouché, who is perhaps the ultimate historical case study in this kind of psychological mastery. Fouché possessed an uncanny, almost supernatural ability to sniff out the spirit of the times. He starts out as this quiet seminary teacher, but in 1789, sensing the winds of the French Revolution, he totally reinvents himself. He sheds his cassock and becomes a radical. By 1792, he casts the deciding vote to execute King Louis XVI. Fast forward a bit, and he outlasts the terrifying reign of his former friend Robespierre. In 1799, he literally pretends to be asleep during Napoleon's coup just so he can avoid committing to the wrong side too early. And then, amazingly, by 1815, after Napoleon's fall, he evades execution and ends up serving the restored monarchy, specifically the brother of the very king he voted to behead. Fouché patiently played for time. He constantly shifted allegiances, while all the hot-headed radicals rushed straight to their own demise at the guillotine. Let's actually zoom in on 1794 for a second. Robespierre, the leader of the Reign of Terror, publicly calls Fouché out. He accuses him of dangerous ambitions. Robespierre is out there ranting, openly, loudly calling for Fouché's arrest. Now, a lesser man would have totally panicked and fought back publicly, right? But Fouché uses the psychology of time. He knows people are secretly terrified of Robespierre. So while Robespierre makes this loud, fast spectacle, Fouché works slowly and indirectly in the shadows. He spends weeks quietly building a massive coalition among the other fearful politicians. By the time the actual confrontation happens, Fouché's already won. Robespierre is the one who gets arrested and executed. Fouché proves that patience isn't just sitting around waiting. It is your strongest shield and a highly active defensive weapon. So the crucial point here is this. Once you understand that time is psychological, you realize it comes in three distinct forms that you can deploy as strategic tools. First, we have long time, which is a defensive posture focused entirely on patience. Next, we have forced time, an offensive posture used to manipulate your opponent's pace. And finally, end time, the execution phase for swift, undeniable conclusions. Let's break each of these down so you can actually apply them to your modern leadership challenges, your career, and your everyday social dynamics. All right, section 3, defensive patience or long time. This is the drawn-out, years-long strategy of managing your life with gentle guidance rather than impulsive, knee-jerk reactions. Our source shares a brilliant 17th century parable about a Ming painter named Chao Yang that perfectly captures what long time is all about. Chao Yang and a young boy are rushing to reach the town gates before they close at sunset. The boy is carrying a loosely tied bundle of really important papers. They ask a local boatman if they'll make it in time. The boatman looks at them and gives this incredibly profound answer: yes, if you do not walk too fast. But Chao Yang and the boy, completely consumed by fear and impatience, ignore the advice. They run. And because they run, the string breaks, the papers scatter everywhere in the wind. It takes them so long to gather the documents that by the time they finally reach the town, the gates are locked. When you force the pace out of impatience, you create a nest of new problems. Hurriers constantly find themselves in crisis mode, spending all their energy fixing the exact problems their own rushing created. To further cement the power of long time, the text offers this great lesson from the Roman general Sertorius. He brought 2 horses out in front of his troops, one incredibly strong, the other weak and old. He had a big, strong man try to pull out the weak horse's tail all at once with brute strength. The guy tugged and tugged, achieving absolutely nothing but amusing the crowd. Then a smaller, weak man stepped up to the strong horse. But instead of pulling the whole tail, he simply plucked the hairs out one by one, slowly and methodically, until the tail was completely bare. The takeaway? Steady perseverance captures and subdues the greatest powers on Earth. It's exactly why the great Japanese leader Tokugawa Ieyasu stood patiently on the sidelines for years, rather than joining his predecessor's rash invasion of Korea. He knew rushing would lead to disaster, so he just waited for the right moment to pick up the pieces. Moving to Section 4, offensive manipulation, or forced time. Now we pivot from defense to offense, where you actively weaponize the clock against other people. The real trick in forcing time is upsetting the timing of your opponents, basically making them abandon their own pace. Look at this incredible historical example. Back in 1473, the Turkish Sultan Mehmed invited a Hungarian emissary for peace talks. But when the emissary arrived, Mehmed wasn't even there. He had moved eastward, and this happened several times. The emissary kept following him, and at every single stop, the Turks lavished the emissary with gifts and massive, incredibly time-consuming banquets. The poor emissary was trapped in a pleasurable but totally frustrating limbo. What he didn't know was that Mehmed was secretly using this exact time to defeat his real enemy, Uzun Hasan, on his western flank. By forcing the Hungarians to wait, Mehmed prevented Hungary from taking advantage of his temporary weakness. Making people wait opens up time for yourself. And honestly, that is half the game right there. And this concept translates directly into the modern world in some pretty fascinating ways. You can force time simply by altering its speed. The famous art dealer Joseph Devine would force indecisive buyers, like John D. Rockefeller, into artificial deadlines. He'd suddenly claim a painting was leaving the country the very next day. That sudden pressure forces the mind to snap, making the opponent yield. Or look at psychoanalysts like Jacques Lacan. He would abruptly end a therapy session after just 10 minutes, with absolutely no warning. This forced the patient to realize they couldn't waste time in future sessions, practically pushing them toward a mental breakthrough. Even magicians like Houdini used forced time. Houdini could escape from handcuffs in seconds, but he would purposefully slow down, making the audience sweat, stretching out the suspense until it was literally terrifying. Altering the pace, whether you speed it up or slow it down, gives you total psychological dominance. Finally, Section 5, the final strike, or end time. All of this preparation, all of this patience, leads us to this crucial third phase, because patience is completely worthless if you're afraid to bring things to a definitive close. Our source uses this incredibly powerful visual metaphor, the hawk. Picture a hawk circling the sky, high above, completely silent, and endlessly patient. Those down below have absolutely no idea they're even being tracked. But when the exact right moment arrives, the hawk doesn't hesitate for a split second. It swoops down with a speed that simply cannot be defended against. Before the prey even knows what happened, the talons have struck. You can wait as long as necessary, mastering long time. But when the conclusion finally comes, it must come quickly. Use speed to paralyze your opponent and impress everyone around you with your aura of absolute terrifying finality. Which brings us to the reversal of this law, and a really profound realization to end our explainer on today. There is no power to be gained in letting go of the reins and adapting to whatever time brings. You must guide time or you will be its merciless victim. Time is not your master. It is a wild psychological force. If you can learn to control your emotions, outweight the rash people around you, manipulate the pace of your rivals, and then strike with total conviction, You don't just manage time, you own it. So the very next time you feel that familiar rush of panic to act quickly, stop and ask yourself, are you guiding time right now, or are you about to become its victim? Think about it. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I will see you in the next one.